All right, welcome back. In this video, we get this lower cowl installed. Continuing the underdash cleanup, I'm going to go ahead and remove some of the wiper assembly. This is actually in really great shape. The original paint, I'm assuming it's original paint or coating. It might not be, but yeah, it's mostly intact. I do just want to clean up and get some of the gunk off of here, and while I'm at it, I'll probably just go ahead and do a quick misting of the rust encapsulator. You can see that's all surface rust on there. But yeah, to remove this, I found that, you know, obviously if you just spin the nut on here, it's just going to turn the motor, but a 7/8 wrench holding it right there will give you enough support to actually loosen this nut off. And I'm going to take pictures, and of course I've got this video for reference in case I take it off and forget which way it goes back on. So as I'm prepping various spots for paint, or pieces for paint, I think I'm going to hit the case of this wiper motor. I don't want to take it all the way apart. It's still working, and I'm not worried about it looking perfect. I don't know if it's been rebuilt or what, but it does have an original stamping on there. So I'm going to mask off the back and mask off the top and just kind of hit the sides. There are some spots here on the back side or the top side, or whichever side we're calling this, where it's got some surface rust. So I just want to touch it up and maybe slow things down. Again, it's kind of a replaceable part, but still, let's keep the original markings on there. All right, I've got the rust encapsulator on the underside of the cowl. You can see where I taped off the, you can see where I taped off the landing spots where it's going to weld to the firewall and sideboards. This panel came with a weld-through primer coating, and in the past I've actually, that protects pretty well. I'm probably not going to do, at least on this panel, any other weld-through primer. Yep, from my other video, it seems to offer moderate protection, maybe, but with the existing stuff there, I'm also going to put, well, we'll see in the future if I do cavity wax once this is all put together and painted. I have the underdash components with their rust encapsulator setting up over there, and I didn't want to do the entire interior. I just wanted to do up underneath the cowl and dash, kind of where I wasn't going to be able to hit it once it was all together. So eventually, when I go paint the interior, I'm gonna do the rest of this. I just wanted protection and something in the hard to reach places. So I'm gonna go ahead and fit up with my export braces and readjust everything and clamp into place, and we're getting really close. Knock on, well, there's no wood around here. Getting really close to being able to weld this in. I still have to do a little more cleanup here. There's still some of the brazing that I need to get out so I can actually weld to there. But yeah, moving along. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start fitting up the brackets, the wiper motor, the linkages, etc. One thing I didn't do is I didn't hit this brake bracket, so I'll probably go back, or sorry, brake pedal. I'll probably go back and do that in a couple other pieces today. But these turned out actually really nice. I'm pretty thrilled. You can see the original stamping on there. Obviously it's, you know, seen better days. Here's where the plan of bagging and tagging everything comes in handy. Some of these things I took off just a couple days ago, but this here, I took this off weeks ago, removing the wiper hub and everything from the cowl and the wiper bracket. So if I hadn't done this, I'd be searching through a bucket of bolts to try to find where those screws are. So one thing to bear in mind, the The motor is mounted with these rubber isolators on here, which means it can't actually ground to the bracket. So if you're like me and you get crazy painting things, be sure to pay attention. There is a grounding strap. I went ahead and used some Scotch-Brite and cleaned up all the old oxidation on there. So you can see it will have a nice contact point, and I cleaned up a spot there where the grounding strap goes. So when I bolt this back in, we're going to have hopefully a good ground going to the motor, and I'll have to do a similar thing and make sure that we've got a clear spot so that we can ground to this piece so the motor's grounded. Okay, everything that is going to be attached to this point is on here, potentially for the last time. I know the wiper attachment points here have a gasket that I don't have in hand yet, so those are just snug in there. As soon as the gasket arrives, I might need to climb underneath there and do those. That's not a big deal. At least I'm not doing the brackets and everything. So this might be the final resting place for these parts before I weld it on. All right, we're getting close. What I did was I went ahead and put everything up, mocked it up again, test fit, put the hood back on just to make sure that I wasn't curving things a weird way. Everything lined up good. And I put a self-tapping screw at the back of each corner of the lower cowl, and then clamps on the side, clamping the lower cowl to the sideboards. Additionally, I've got the export braces lined up. I know as soon as I unclamp everything and take the upper cowl off that things are going to shift around. So I marked where it lined up. Once I remove the upper cowl, I'm going to go ahead and line it up back to those marks and retighten up the bolts at the back of the export braces. So that should get me right back to where I was, and I think we're ready to start clamping and start burning in some metal. If you recall from when I was testing the weld-through primer, it seemed to work a little better and smoke quite a bit less if I cleaned up the mating surface, kind of where the holes were. So I'm going along with a Q-tip and a little lacquer thinner right here and just cleaning it down to bare metal underneath, so that when I weld, I'm welding to that bare metal there. And I'm starting from essentially the center line and working my way outwards, kind of inching the clamps along. So I've got, just making sure I've got the two pieces of metal as flat as possible as I go along. That just kind of keeps any gaps from forming in between and makes a nice flush joint. There were a couple of welds that I had some spattering going on, and one or two that I had to go back and touch up a little bit. But overall, I'm actually really pleased with the welds. Once I kind of got my technique dialed in and the settings, well, we'll call it 2/3 technique, 1/3 settings. Once I got it dialed in, the welds were filling in nicely and laying actually fairly flat. So I didn't have to go back and do too much grinding. So something actually required my attention. I got most of the welds ground flat. I know it's going to be probably at least a few days before I get back, so I've got a couple still to grind, but I went ahead and just kind of put a quick dusting of weld-through primer on here just to protect it until I can get back to it. Okay, now that I have the lower cowl in place, the next steps are going to be prepping this lower cowl to receive the upper cowl on top of it, and prepping the upper cowl to get welded in. As if you've ever seen, gosh, tons of people who restore these, they all say the same thing, and it makes sense. When you go to replace this, or before you weld on the upper cowl, it might be worth your time to get some seam sealer and seal off this little lip here on the hats. Especially if you leave it outside, you're going to have water that pools in here and just sits, and this is a common rust out point. And my car was actually in pretty good shape from some others that I've seen, and I'll go over and show you what the cowl that I pulled out of here looked like. Okay, this is the lower cowl that I pulled off. Honestly, from up top, it doesn't look all that bad. But let me show you underneath what it looked like. Okay, so underneath here is the inside of, let's see, driver side cowl. And you can tell, well, here, we'll just go ahead and pull that piece right off. You're rusted all the way through. This is just flaking off in my hand. So it is completely perished. That's from moisture just getting and sitting in the cowl. When you accumulate a bunch of leaves, pine needles, whatever, and it just sits in there, you wind up with this kind of situation. And this side looks honestly better than the passenger side. You can see we're a hole straight through there. So common failure point on first generation Mustangs is that hat, and putting that seam sealer on there might buy you, at least a few extra years for only a couple bucks. So one other thing I'm going to point out as I'm prepping this, if you notice the wiper arms, studs, whatever you want to call them. If Don is watching this, he's gonna cry a little, but I should have noticed this before I went and installed everything or welded it in, but there is a little bit of clearance on the top, and it is actually making contact on the bottom. Not so much that I couldn't, pretty easily screw it in here. So it's touching, but it's not dire. But I do want to just widen this hole a little bit so I have a little clearance all the way around. I don't know if it'll make any noise when I start it up, but you don't want it dragging on the metal and wearing out the motor or whatever, cutting into, I'm not worried about cutting into that, but still, it's not a great situation. So what I'm going to do is drop this off on both of them. That one's pretty close too. I don't think it's touching, but it's coming darn close. Drop these out and then just widen this hole a little bit just to give it, maybe a millimeter of clearance or whatnot. There is a gasket that goes in between where this mounts and the back side of this. The original one has it. I'll try to show you that. The original cowl has it, but it is so perished, it's not usable anymore. So that's another $4 and change or whatever it is from CJ Pony Parts. Okay, that is all for now. I'm really excited we got this cowl bottom in. Gonna move forward, finish prepping this, and start in on the top. I won't bore you with watching paint dry, but I'm gonna go ahead and use Eastwood Rust Encapsulator in the bottom, kind of identical to what I did in prepping the other side of this. And then some Eastwood brushable seam sealer. I've had great luck with Eastwood products, so we'll go ahead and stick with them. All right, if you're still with me, I appreciate you watching. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.